Okay, we are now recording. This is Faith and Calm, part 12. Wow, we're already on part 12.
Wow.
Um, so I think the topic tonight is related to the Parsha that we just had last week, the Torah reading that we did last week, which I think has good lessons, all about, starts out with about lighting the menorah. And you might say, oh, okay, that happened, but the temple's not in existence. The menorah is hidden away somewhere in catacombs of catacombs underneath the temple. By the way, if you've ever been there on the tunnel tours, you know that there are tunnels and tunnels underneath, and underneath the whole Har Habayis, the Temple Mount, and they were done there originally by King Solomon, and all the items that Moses made, the Ark, the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie was deliberately set in a different location, but it's there underneath. It's still existent, and it's still underneath the temple, and so is the menorah, and so are the table where the showbread was, and everything else that Moses made. Everything is still in existence, but we just don't see it. It's hidden underneath. That's an interesting point. So what does it mean it's hidden underneath? And so the menorah was lit in the temple every day by Aaron, the high priest. And the Rebbe was speaking to women, like it's some 30 years ago, to Women's Convention. And he says it's not incidental that the Women's Convention is the same week as we read about the menorah, because it has an important lesson, especially for women. What is the lesson of the menorah? Well, why do you need a menorah? You need a menorah or a candle, a light, in order to illuminate the darkness. There's darkness out there. There's a lot of darkness out there. And when there's darkness, two things happen. One, you can't see what you're doing, right? That's obvious. And you don't know what you're doing. It's completely black. It's dark out there. And the second piece is, the problem is that you can stumble. You can get lost if you can't see where you're going. That's on the physical level. The Rebbe says, it says that the Ner Hashem Neshamas Adam, the light of God, is the soul of the person. So there's a spiritual light that we have to bring into this world. And when that spiritual light illuminates the material darkness, because if you look at the world materially, and all you do is see what's happening materially in front of your eyes, in terms of the stories that we've had to go through, the two already, and who knows what's coming next, then it can look really dark. And you need to illuminate. But you have to bring a spiritual illumination. You have to bring spiritual light into the situation. You have to bring something, you have to illuminate for yourself and for other people. Now, the interesting thing about Rebbe points out about a candle is that it's not useful for itself. It's the whole purpose is the function to do something, light something else. And so too we actually illuminate our souls when we start talking and communicating and illuminating other people's eyes. And in order to do that, you have to not only just light them, inspire them one time, but the line in the Parsha, the Torah reading that we read last week, was Bahaloscha et haneros. Alosa means to lift up, to elevate too, but it's in the Lashon Hitpael, self-inflective, which means that it has to illuminate, it has to kindle it, it has to light up itself. It has to illuminate itself, not kindle. Kindle, we say lahadlik ner Shabbos, the kindle. This is not kindling. This is lifting up. So the Rebbe says the words are very particular, and they're giving you an important lesson. A, you have to lift up another person, and two, you have to do it. You have to do it until the person rises himself, which every good teacher knows. It's not good enough to just stuff facts into somebody's head. You have to make sure that they actually catch fire and they get excited about the idea, and then they turn on another person. So we're all lamplighters, the Rebbe says. That's the lesson of this Parsha. We have to be lamplighters. And when you're a lamplighter and you illuminate other people and you make other people excited and happy, then God illuminates by you. It's a response from above. So we illuminate, and then the illumination comes from above. And that's the basic lesson. And he says it's a very relevant to women because they are the ones who basically, not only do they light the Shabbos candles and the holiday candles in the house, but they're also about really illuminating and making the the whole house illuminated, to bring in something a little bit on a higher level, a spiritual level, aspiring level, that just isn't just about the material world, but it's about something about what our mission is and what we're supposed to do. So this is a very relevant class for Jewish women, and a very lesson you have to kindle. And you might think it's just, me, I'm just a little spark. Yeah, but you only need a little bit of light to illuminate a dark place. And all you have to do is kindle it, and then it starts growing by itself. Because that's what fire is. You just bring a little spark, and then all of a sudden it catches, and then it grows, and it grows, and it grows. So it's not about how much you have, it's about how pure you are. And that's, he says, the other lesson, that when you are in the temple, who light the menorah? So he says, the Rebbe points out there are 3 laws. If you look in the Rambam about the lighting of the menorah, it is allowed to be lit by other people, not just Kohanim, but the one who has to prepare the candle and where it has to be lit, the menorah, is in the temple. So it has to be a Kohen, and he says all 3 are important. Everybody is part of this mission. Everybody can light the menorah. But the thing is, it has to be done in a way that's a Kohen. What's a Kohen? Kohen is somebody who's completely devoted and connected to, he has to prepare it, meaning the oil has to be prepared and the dirt has to be removed. So in order to do that, you have to do it in the proper way. So some people say, any kind of Judaism, let's just get something out there, and however he understands it, that's great. And whatever he, and say it any way you want. And the Rebbe says the message is it has to be done in the holy place, and it has to be done through a holy person, meaning that what you bring has to be something that is unadulterated, because people are looking for unadulterated truth. They get a lot of messages these days, and they sense that they're being, it's partial truth. Some things are okay, but there's a hidden agenda inside of all of it. So you got to get rid of all the labels, all the groups, all the people who say this way and this way and that way, and only my way, and all this other kinds of things, and just spread it as true godliness, as true holiness, as straight from Hashem. And that's what can actually illuminate a person. That's what it can actually make a person excited. When they sense that you're 100% sincere and it's nothing about me and my agendas or how I look at it and so forth. I am only interested in bringing something 100% true. And that can kindle a person. That will illuminate the person. Now, the fact of the matter is that our candles go out sometimes. And he says, that's not a problem. Your laws go out, other people seem to be dead. And the menorah had 7 branches, meaning that there are many different paths that different people have to being kindled and being excited about Judaism. That's okay that there are different branches. But ultimately, in the menorah, let's do a screen share. Okay, I got a picture of menorah. Okay, what do I have to do to do screen share? Share screen. Okay, I'm doing it now. Share.
Yeah, then you hit that share.
Menorah. Okay.
Okay.
So there's the menorah. I don't know if that's working there,
Yeah.
but you see that this one has 7 branches in the temple, right? So this is how it looked like gold, and it had the branches and so forth. So it all has one base associated with it. It has one central mass, and that's how it was made. It was one mass, one central, because all souls are ultimately rooted in one core element. But they branch out. So just like a child, it comes from the parents and so forth, but they go their own directions, they grow and go into others. And everyone goes his own way. But if you can reach back into the core, into the center, then you can illuminate all of them, and they can and you can rekindle it. And that was the job of the high priest. He lit at the menorah every day. Well, let's see if I can go back to presentation. Now I don't know how to go back. Shalom Judas, you can help me get back?
I'm here.
Okay.
Just a second.
That's
You
okay.
have to, here,
Just
a second.
No.
No, here. Now you're gonna, where is, here, you see this green and red bar?
Oh.
And you're gonna just go stop share right here.
Stop share.
Yeah.
Oh, my techie helped me. Great. I'm so happy. Thanks, a kindergarten. I should have practiced. See, there you go. Everything is for practice. Um, so you got to get back to that core. You have to get back to that core, and that's what the mimer says. That there's a mimer from the Rebbe saying, that actually that central piece, the Kohen Gadol, that's the tzaddik. He's the one that everybody comes down into this world, and after a while you go off and you're involved in the world, and that's okay. And everybody gets colored and gets distracted and gets moved off to different sides. But there are certain unique individuals who are, when they're down here in this world, they remain completely a soul and completely devoted, and they have no personal identity or ego associated with it. It's a very rare person. It's called a tzaddik. It's tzaddik. The tzaddik, the leader of the generation. Moshe was that person. Maharon was that person. The Rebbe is that person. That is a person who's just, when you talk to them, you see that there is absolutely, the whole focus is only on connecting you and godliness, and he doesn't exist in between. There's no intermediary in position, because there's no agenda there other than what can I do for you in order to make you illuminate and glow. So I'll tell a story about that. I just read it this week. I heard it before, but I had forgotten about it. There was a Jewish writer for the New York Times Magazine. He's still there, actually. I think he's a very well-known person. His name is Stephen Dubner, and he wrote an economics book called Freakonomics. I think that's what he's famous for, but he also wrote a full-length book about his personal life story, and it's called not Tortured Souls, but Turbulent Souls. And his story is quite interesting. He is Jewish, but he was not raised Jewish. He was raised Catholic. He was a Catholic choir boy. And he didn't know anything about Judaism, because both his parents converted to Catholicism in the 1950s. And they didn't tell him anything about their background or anything Jewish. In fact, Judaism was not even allowed to be mentioned in the house at all. They were not allowed to ask about it or question about it. The closest thing was occasionally the father would sing my Shema. But both of them grew up in religious households. The father grew up in a religious household, the mother didn't. And you can sort of understand why they did this, and what, the sort of the nature of things in the 1950s. The mother was born, her name was Greenglass. And she was a first cousin of Ethel Greenglass, who was better known as Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. So these were the famous Jewish scientists who were during the witch hunts of the 1950s were arrested and tried for high treason against the United States for selling the atom bomb to the Soviets. And they were put to death. They were executed by electric chair in Sing Sing. And it's a scandal. The two sons have spent the rest of their life trying to show how this was just all railroaded. It was a lynch mob. It was not justice. It was not in any form justice. It was just mass hysteria, that the United States was worried. How did the Russians get the atomic bomb so quickly? The fact was that they took most of the German scientists. It's like we took most of the German scientists, Oppenheimer and so forth, and Kellner and others, to try and make the bomb. And they took them too. That's how they figured it out. But they figured somebody must have stolen the ideas, and it was a kangaroo court. And and the mob was running wild. Sounds a familiar story. And it's very hard to get good justice when all the press and everybody else is screaming for blood. And that's what happened to them. And the Jews did not go and revolt in the streets, but there was a tremendous international requests, from justices and people around the world. Einstein got involved and so forth, but it was no good. They were put to death in the electric chair. And she converted. She converted to Catholicism and raised a kid who, with no understanding and no connection to Judaism, no knowledge about Judaism, but a very smart guy, and he was a very talented writer. And at one point in time, he was assigned the task of writing a 8,000-word article for the New York Times Magazine about the Chabad Hasidism movement, and he started studying. I heard the story from Rabbi Jacobson, I guess, who was learning with him. He was a very interesting person, and he really took to the ideas. It answered a lot of questions that he had, as a choir boy, who was just told not to ask these questions. And he so to speak, converted, although it wasn't a conversion. He was born to a Jewish mother. And he wrote this book, Turbulent Souls, about his trouble, because his father died at a young age. He was when he was 10. Father was at some ecstatic, charismatic service and just had a heart attack and died. And the mother, though, was a very what would you say? Very religious, very devout Catholic lady, the Rosemary and everything else. And she was horrified that her son, went back to Judaism. And she cut him off entirely. She wouldn't talk to him or anything else. And Cardinal Connor, I guess, who was the cardinal from New York City, saw Stephen Dubnow's article, and he was very impressed with it, and he actually liked it very much. And he volunteered to be a go-between between the mother and the son. And he went to the mother and he said, it's not like pre-Vatican II, there's something called informed conscience. And your son, is conscientiously made his decision, to go back to Judaism. It's not a crime. And the son asked the mother, so what did you think? And she said he was just being nice. She didn't believe him because, you see, it's like one of the politicians recently, he says, we never let the facts get in the way of the truth. So when people run around and they think they've got all the truth, then they don't listen even to the facts, because the facts are not relevant. I know what the truth is. The truth is that, this is what the truth is. And whether the facts are that there were 900 people killed, 89 people killed in Chicago last weekend not by policemen, but by a runaway crime wave and black crime, which is terrible. It has to be dealt with. The facts aren't important. The truth is important. So they have the truth. See, the stories are relevant today. It just goes around and around and around. And this is what our job is to try and bring a little bit of, through humor and through whatever mechanisms that we can, and in sincerity and understanding where people are coming from, and to kindle them and to make them understand, that truth is better, and truth is truth, and it connects with the facts, and the fact is that we are, we're on a mission, and it's difficult, and there's a lot of challenges involved, and there's a lot of darkness there, and sometimes you do see those darknesses. But ultimately, we, it's people like to hear something honest and sincere, and they connect with that, and it's great. It's really great. So I'll finish with another little story. This is an older story from the Gemara, and it talks about, about dealing with difficult and objections and stuff of that sort. So there was a man who was converted to Judaism in the time of the great rabbis Hillel and Shammai. You probably heard the story before. And he goes to the Rabbi Shammai and he says, I want to learn the entire Torah while standing on one foot. And Shammai pushes him away with a beam, a construction beam. He was in the construction business. It was handy. He had it around. And then he goes to Hillel and says, are you great? Hillel and says, I want to learn Torah while standing on a foot. And Hillel tells him the famous line, everything that is objectionable to you, you should not do to others. And the rest of the Torah is all explanation, and you should learn it, which is usually left out. That's that second part. Now, we don't understand that story. Usually we just think, Shammai was a bad, a strict person, and Hillel was a kind person. We're not really understanding it, because Shammai also, he said you have to greet everybody with a pleasant face. So he was very into being nice to people and greeting people pleasantly. So what was this real story going on there? The real story is that Shammai was telling him, listen, you want to learn all of Torah while standing on foot. What he was asking was basically, I want to learn Torah in such a way that I'm always inspired and everything is always going well. Not the second foot. I never want to go backwards. I just want to go forward. I just want to stand on one foot and just have a lot, hallelujah, everything wonderful experience. And Shammai was trying to explain to him, you don't understand how the world was created. Here's a beam, the beam is like, the construction material for creating the world. The world was created so that you have to walk on 2 feet. And sometimes things go forward and sometimes things don't. And sometimes things are inspiring and some things are not, and so forth. So, you really have to realize that it's not possible. What you're asking is not realistic, and so forth. There are times where you're going to be fighting the darkness. And by the way, when you're fighting the darkness, sometimes you're going to be illuminating things even more, because the deeper the darkness that you overturn and you don't allow it to affect yourself, the more light you bring into this world, because there's nothing like the light that comes from darkness. So it's really the darkness that you sometimes do, or the metaphor that I just heard is sometimes, when you want to turn off a light, you can cut a cord. But when you go into the generator room and you turn off the generator, then you kill all the electricity. That's the negative side, but it's the same thing as the positive. When you fight darkness in its core, where it's in its source, which is what we're dealing with right now, you are actually causing the greatest depth of illumination, because you're getting right to the source of all things. It's hard, it's difficult, but but the same thing with our personal life. When you really dig down all the layers of the human personality and you deal with your deepest fears and phobias, you actually you're addressing the deepest darkness, and you're actually causing the greatest light. So this is one of the lessons that Shammai was teaching him, and Hillel did not disagree with him. Hillel just had a more easy way of explaining it to him, and he says, "I'll continue your explanation." He says, "You want to be able to do what he did. Then you know what? Don't do to others what you're trying to do to others what you wouldn't do to yourself." So what Hillel was telling him was as follows. Hillel was saying, you know what? When you bring a little light for yourself, you don't know what effect it can have on another person. It may not even be in the same room. It may be, there's connections, spiritual connections around the world. When one person lights candles, when one person does one mitzvah, it could affect somebody in Israel and in Russia or Soviet Union or anywhere else. He says, when you do something, you may not feel it yourself, but you may have lifted up somebody else. Because when you illuminate us light in the menorah, all those branches are all connected, and you don't know what you're making easier for somebody else somewhere else. So everyone who does one positive thing, one good thing, one exciting thing, and you may not even feel it yourself. You don't know what you're doing and how you're affecting another person somewhere else in the world. And so these are 2 lessons I'm trying to live with this week, and hopefully that's good. And is my wife still around? Shalom Meshudas? Oops. Got her off guard. Okay, so we're going to have a slight intermission while we're waiting for her, and we'll be open to questions now. Thank you.
Yecheskel Shemen?
Yes.
When you say that we're fighting this darkness now, what are you referring to?
What am I
Specific.
So everyone has their own darkness to deal with and so forth.
Right.
I have darkness with trying to, personal darkness, and then there's national darkness and so forth. And all of that is going on at the same time.
When you think of the national darkness, are you referring to the difficulties going on with the the racial difficulties and the police and all of that? Are you referring to the virus, or everything all together?
All of them.
All of it.
All of it. All of it, the cutbacks in the police departments, everything, the bankruptcy of the state government, but they're still going to fund, testing stations for everybody who likes to protest. But it's just like all of it's going on. But it's even on the personal level. There are people who are really struggling. People we know who passed away. People who are on really struggling themselves, and people who a tremendous number of people who are out of work, and it's causing all sorts of stress and anxiety, and then there are people who are going crazy at home with family and stuff of that sort to change situation. So
And the virus,
it's
the virus remains such an enigma too. It just doesn't seem to be anything they can get a handle on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. So
but
Well, it's not so simple. It's not so simple. It's scientific stuff. They can't find a cure. They can't find. It takes a long time.
oh no, I understand that it takes a long time. I think it's.
Oh, I didn't know you
it's-
could hear me. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
okay.
just-
No, it's just unusual that it's as complex as it is.
I guess Hashem wants to make it a hard test.
Okay, good.
That's what I was thinking.
It's an incredible
Yeah.
thing. In Crown Heights, about more. Okay, Molly. Wait, what did I decide to do? Oh, I have to hike up my chair. So, is that better? Can you see my whole face now?
Yep,
Yeah.
we're okay.
Yeah.
Great.
It's crazy that right after the Corona thing, all of a sudden people are rioting. I think people are just so burnt out from everything. They're just taking out all their frustrations on this. It's a good outlet,
Yeah.
It is. It's like, oh, this is great. Now we have something to get upset about, because never before Vietnam was one thing, but there have been police brutality situations before, but it never got so out of hand. There was something that happened in Baltimore like a year ago or something, but
Freddie Gray.
this is like over the whole country and the whole world. Like, what does the world care about it? I don't know what other countries it took place in. Does anybody know? But I heard somebody say it's
It's
affecting
all over the
other
world,
countries
sorry.
also.
It's all over the world.
What other countries?
Oh, you mean about rioting?
Yeah.
No, I don't know
Everywhere.
about the rioting, but
Oh, you thought I was talking about the virus? No, that I know.
yeah, Okay, good.
That I know, that like Italy and whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't mind, I'm going to start because we want to do
Okay.
a little bit shorter class today. And so I think in the title of the email that nobody got, I think I called this class "How to Be a Peaceful Activist," and because calm and faith and
Forgive me,
calm.
I didn't get to hear what was the title supposed to be?
How to be a peaceful activist.
How to
Activist.
Oh,
How to be a peaceful activist. Because
That's cute.
having faith and calm is not synonymous with being passive. And in my experience, inactivity brings anxiety and action brings peace. So, but it has to be the right kind of action. And so, so the first thing I'm going to talk about, since you guys have heard me so many times before, I'm going to talk about an unusual action, and the action of writing to the Rebbe. You've heard about all my stories about writing to the Rebbe, why I think that's a good action. And it's a good action for any Jew. So before I talk about, I want to talk about two things: why to write to the Rebbe and how to write to the Rebbe. And so it's a very strange thing. Why would anybody write to the Lubavitcher Rebbe? When I grew up, I never heard about the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I heard about God. That's all. I heard about God. That's what I heard about. And who is this person, and why should I write to him? What does he have to do with me? So, here I made a visual. So, Rebbe in Hebrew is Resh Beis Yud, and it's an acronym. And it means, it's an acronym for Rosh B'nai Yisrael. That means
oh,
head of the children of Israel. And a Rebbe is, that's what a Rebbe is. A Rebbe is a Rebbe is a collective soul. We all have souls, and some of us have collective souls. We all have connections to each other. And I'm sure all of you have experienced soul connections with somebody. Very briefly, I know that, did I tell you the story before when John Lennon passed away? I didn't hear about it. I was in Florida, and that night I couldn't sleep all night, and I had terrible dreams that New York had become wildly violent, and I was crying in my dreams, and I think I was actually crying. Tears were streaming down my face, and I was saying, and I was talking to my sister, and I was saying, Marilyn, you have to leave New York. It's crazy now. It's wildly violent. You have to leave. And she was saying, oh, it's always been like this. It's normal. I can stay here a while longer. And I said, no, you don't understand. It's gotten so much worse. And I woke up in the morning and I turned on the news and I heard that John Lennon had been assassinated and he lived around the corner from my sister. And I knew instantly what had happened. I knew, my sister Marilyn, she found out about this last night. And she's been crying all night. And I've been picking up on her tears and her angst. And I called my sister and she said, did you hear what happened? I said, yes. And my sister said, I've been crying all night. I said, yeah, I know. And so we all have soul connections, that
Wow.
we're not just this limited human being that we see. And a Rebbe it's called like a global soul. And he has connection to all the Jews. So, some other time, if I haven't told you already, I'll tell you about the first time. I'm not going to do it tonight. I'll tell you about the first time I saw the Rebbe. But let me tell you in a nutshell, as soon as I walked away from the Rebbe, I started crying hysterically, happy crying for 20 minutes. And I'm not, by personality, I'm not a mushball. I'm not an emotional mushball. I'm much more logical. And but there was something so powerful about that soul encounter that it pulled that out of me. So anyway, what is the whole purpose of having collective souls? What is the purpose of having tzaddikim, holy people? What is the whole purpose? It's, in order to explain that, I have to explain God's purpose in creating the world. It's so interesting. Why did God make the world? So we're told that God made the world because he wanted, first of all, our world is the end of a series of things that Hashem created. Hashem created worlds that were successively darker and darker and darker, where godliness was hidden more and more and more, until he came to our world, which is the darkest of dark, where godliness is almost completely hidden. And it was God's deepest desire would have been that godliness would be completely hidden, and in such a hidden world that people would find him. That's God's desire. That it's sort of like why is the game? Somebody's. I know. I know.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm if you don't mind, I'm going to mute.
It's fine.
Okay. So it's sort of, why is the game hide and seek so popular with kids? Now, I believe the game hide and seek is the most popular game of all time, because it's exactly what our world is. Hashem made a world where he is hiding, and it's our job to find him. So God's original intention was almost total concealment. But he saw in his understanding and his wisdom that it's not going to work. Total concealment, they'll never find me. So God tempered that total concealment with mercy. And what was the mercy that he tempered the total concealment with? He added the miracles in the Torah, where and what is a miracle? A miracle is where you see God's hand. That's what a miracle is. All of a sudden, the curtain parts, and for a flash, you see that Hashem is running the world. And so he tempered it with the miracles in the Torah, and also the miracles that would be done by tzaddikim throughout the generations. And it said he scattered the tzaddikim throughout all the generations. He made them very few, but he put some in every generation, so that the Jewish people could see miracles. And when you see a miracle, it's such a comforting experience. Why? Because you've suddenly seen Hashem's hand. You've suddenly seen, wow. I have to say, it's such a comforting experience. There's a young woman on our street, like a little angel, right? She's about 27 years old, and her family has been through heck and high water this year. Heck and high water. She, I won't go into details. They already had a death in the family a year ago, and now she was, and she was in critical condition during the whole pandemic. She was in absolutely critical condition, not from COVID, from something else, from something else. And, her life was hanging by a hair. The entire community was davening for her. Her life was hanging by a hair. The other day, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, and she's in the hospital and she has lung things, and that's all she needs, to be in a hospital where COVID is all around. And the other, I think it was 2 days ago, I was taking a walk on the street, and I saw in the distance a figure from behind that looked like her. I was thinking, possible. And the person was walking with somebody else relatively at a nice pace. And when they went, I ran into a neighbor's house and I said, is that? And I said her name. And they said, and I thought, oh my God, I started crying. It's Kanai Nahar. It was beautiful. Like the hand that I saw the hand of, I came in and I said to Yeskel Shimon, I just saw the hand of God. I just saw a walking miracle. So anyway, Hashem shows his hand through miracles, and miracles are very, very calming. So many miracles have been generated by the Rebbe that it's just totally not normal. It's true that in that all the Chabad Rebbeim did miracles. One of the wives of one of the Chabad Rebbeim, when a miracle happened and somebody got excited, she said, what are you getting excited about? In my father's time, when my father was the Rebbe, the miracles were rolling on the floor. I have to say that now the miracles are also rolling on the floor. There's so many of them. My own life, my friends' lives, people that I know very, very, very well, open miracles, unbelievable stuff. So after seeing so many miracles and reading so many documented miracles with names, dates, places that happened through the Rebbe, I've come to the unscientific conclusion, but the conclusion that I believe that Hashem gives people. You don't have to believe what I believe, okay? Yeah, I'm out there somewhere, but I've come to the conclusion that Hashem gives people Hashem gives people problems because he wants them to connect to the Rebbe. Because when a person has a terrible problem, eventually they start hearing about the Rebbe and they connect to the Rebbe. So anyway, you've heard already some of my miracle stories. I'm going to tell you one of my favorite miracle stories tonight, and if you heard it before, it's good enough so you can hear it again. But I don't think I told it in this series. So I first read about it in this book, which is a magnificent book. It's called Miracles and Amazing Stories in Our Times by Yehudis Engel. I had many, many copies. There's volume 1 and 2, but I loaned them out, and many of them have disappeared, including all my copies of volume 1, which is like a priceless thing. But whatever. This is a story from volume 1. And before I go into the story, I want to tell you that I verified it with the person that it happened to. I called her up and verified every detail. So anyway, this story is about a woman named Ahuva Albrecht. And Ahuva Albrecht, I guess you'd say, she lives in Baltimore. And she's married. And her husband, she's frum, she's an observant Jew. And her husband was a, as they call it, Fabrenta. That means a on fire Lubavitcher. And they were happily married, but so it was going to be her birthday. Her birthday was approaching, or it was her birthday. And Lubavitchers have a custom of writing to the Rebbe on their birthday and reporting about what they did in the last year and asking for blessings and telling them what they would like to happen, writing about what blessings you would like for the next year. So she considered her husband the Lubavitcher. She's observant, but she happened to be married to a Lubavitcher. So, but she was enough of a Lubavitcher that she liked this custom, and she wrote to the Rebbe. And she did the usual ritual, the usual steps before you write to the Rebbe. She took a cup, any kind of cup, and she washed her right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. It's a spiritual thing. Some other time, if you want, I can explain it. And she gave charity before you write a letter to the Rebbe. Those two things are very, very customary, very important. And because when you show you're concerned for someone else, Hashem, that you deserve that Hashem shows his kindness to you. So she wrote a letter about, at that time, her husband happened to be ill. Her husband happened to be very ill. And his illness was not only a problem in itself, but it was also threatening their income because he couldn't work. So she wrote a letter for her birthday and asked for a blessing for herself, asked for a blessing for her husband's health, and she inserted it. She inserted it at random. That's how you do it. You take a book of the letter. Let me backtrack just a little bit. Before the Rebbe's stroke, the Rebbe had written that people. He got hundreds of letters a day from people, and he wrote back, and they kept copies of what he wrote, except without the name of the person that it went to. They just, a copy of the Rebbe's letter of advice. And before his stroke, after his stroke, he couldn't speak anymore. Before his stroke, he pushed his secretariat. He had like several rabbis who were his secretariat. He pushed them to publish those letters. Just get them out there, publish them. It's very important. Publish them now, publish them. And so they did. And anyway, it's an old Jewish custom that if you need direction, you need life direction in something, not a question of Jewish law. A question of Jewish law, you ask a halachic rabbi, you ask a rabbi who answers questions about Jewish law. But a question about a life decision. Should I move to Pennsylvania, or should I stay here? Should I, things like that are not questions of Jewish law. If you don't have if you haven't been able to get a satisfactory answer through normal channels of asking advice, then you can open up any holy Jewish book and take direction from what you read on the page. So Lubavitcher, since the Rebbe wrote all these letters of advice, and they're such practical, down-to-earth advice dealing with every kind of calamity in life, they insert their letters into these books of the Rebbe's answers to people. So anyway, that's what she did. She wrote her letter and she inserted it at random into a Yiddish volume. The Rebbe spoke in Yiddish. The Rebbe wrote in Yiddish a lot of the time, sometimes in English, mostly in Yiddish, sometimes in Hebrew. And so she had a volume of Yiddish, and she put her letter in there asking for a blessing for herself and for her husband's health. And she opened it up, and the letters that she opened to, she knows Hebrew. Yiddish happens to be written in Hebrew letters, but it's not Hebrew. So she couldn't understand she knew she wouldn't understand it, but she just wanted to see what page she opened to. And she figured she'd bring it to somebody who reads Yiddish. And on that page, she did understand, she saw letters that made one word several times, and she was absolutely horrified because the word that she recognized was sheitel. Sheitel means wig. And she's a religious Jewish lady who covered her hair with probably a kerchief. She didn't like wigs. And she thought, oh no, please God, let the Rebbe not be giving advice to put on a wig. Please, no. She ran to a friend of hers who knows Yiddish, and she said, translate. And the lady read the letter to her, and she said, well, the Rebbe is writing to a couple, and he's saying that it would be a really wonderful idea if the wife would start wearing a wig. He says that it's going to be good for the husband's health, and that it's going to bring blessing to the whole family. And she thought, oh my gosh, it's exactly what I never wanted to do. But she's a woman of integrity, and she told herself, look, I wrote to him for a blessing. If I wrote to the Rebbe for a blessing, it's not right not to take the advice. Don't worry. Don't not write to the Rebbe because you're afraid he's going to tell you to put on a wig. Because he's not going to give you such a letter, because she was already observant. She was already wearing a wig. She was already covering her hair. It's just the next small step for her. And so don't worry. Don't let that stop you from writing to the Rebbe. Believe me, every woman's chief stumbling block, even if they acknowledge that Torah is beautiful, their chief stumbling block for almost every woman is the thought of covering their hair, because women are very identified with their hair. It's a session on its own. But anyway, so but anyway, she's a woman of integrity. She said, you know, I asked for a blessing. I'm not going to not take the Rebbe's advice. And so, and also the Rebbe said that this would be a channel for her husband's health. And she had specifically written about her husband's health. So the Rebbe also wrote in the letter that the woman should buy a beautiful sheitel, a beautiful wig. And the Rebbe said, don't worry about the cost because I'm going to pay for it. So anyway, okay. She puts on she immediately goes out, gets a wig, puts it on her head. 2 weeks later, she has a dream. She's sleeping at night and she has a dream. And in her dream, she's walking with her husband and the Lubavitcher Rebbe is walking towards them. And he's looking at her. And she keeps thinking, why is the Rebbe looking at me? He should be looking at my husband. My husband's the Lubavitcher. I'm just I'm his wife. I'm from, it's true, but he's the Verbrennte Lubavitcher, not me. But the Rebbe was looking at her. And the Rebbe approached and he said, regarding your husband's health, he should go back to the doctor and he should request, and the Rebbe named a specific medical test. The Rebbe said he should have the specific medical test. And in the dream, the Rebbe continues and he says, and this medical test is going to pinpoint what is wrong with your husband. And once it's pinpointed, the doctor is going to tell you that there are 2 different ways to treat this problem. One is invasive, the other is not invasive. Choose the non-invasive remedy. End of dream. And she woke up and she said, whoa. And she told her husband, and they both felt that this was not a dream. This was much more than a dream. And so they immediately go to the doctor that day and they tell the doctor, we want this test. And he said, are you out of your mind? This test has nothing to do with your husband's illness. This has nothing to do with it. Your insurance will never pay for it. It has nothing to do with it. No relation whatsoever. They said, we want this test. We'll pay for it. We don't care. We want this test. He said, what are you wasting? It's a lot of money, a tremendous amount of money. Why are you wasting your money? It will not tell you a thing about your husband. And they said, humor us. And he must have been an unusual doctor because he did humor them. And he ordered the test. And they had the test, and the test pinpointed what was wrong with the husband. When they went to the doctor said, wow, that test pinpointed what was wrong with your husband. I want to tell you that there are 2 ways to treat it. There's an invasive method, and then there's a new method that's not invasive. And before he said anything else, they said, yeah, that's what we want. We want the non-invasive method. I was thinking, these people are nuts. First, they tell me to use this wacky test. And now, without even hearing details, they're about a life, and a major life decision. They're making it in 2 seconds. What's wrong with them? Anyway, they choose the non-invasive path. It cures the husband. He's completely better. So it was a good story. I read it. I thought, oh, that's a good story. I'm not going to tell a story without confirming it, though. So one of my best friends happens to live in Baltimore, and I called her up and I said, "Is there an Ahuva Albrecht in Baltimore?" She said, "Yes." No, she said, "I don't know. Let me look in the Jewish directory. There's a Jewish directory in Baltimore." She looks it up. She says, "Yeah, Ahuva and Moshe Albrecht. They live on such and such a street. You want the number?" I said, "Yeah, give me the number." So she gave me the number, and I called up. It was before Pesach, right before, days before Passover. And I called her up and I said, in Boston, we have a ladies' shir on Shabbos. And they asked me to speak at the first one. And I read your story. And I'd really like to tell it at the Shabbos shir. And she said, "I'm very busy." And it's right before Pesach. And I said, "Oh yeah, I just want to know, is it true? Is it all true? What was written in Yehudas Engel's book? Is it all true?" And she says, "Yes, it's 100% true. And it's even more than that. There's much more than what was written in the book." I said, "Can I just ask you 2 brief questions?" She said, "Okay, fast." No, she didn't say fast. She said, "Okay." And I said, "Did the Rebbe specify that this would be good in the dream? Did the Rebbe really specify? No, in the letter, did the Rebbe specify this would be good for your husband's health?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, and did the Rebbe specify by name the actual test?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Oh," and I said, "But I have so many more questions." And she said, "It's right before Pesach. All my relatives are already here, and I have no time. I can't do this." And she said, "I'll take your number and I'll call you when I have the time." So she took my number. We hung up. I told the story. Everybody liked it. later on that summer, it was another, I spoke many times that summer, and I was asked to speak again. And for summer, it was at the end of the summer. This is like 5 months later, something like that. And Shabbos is fast approaching, and I have nothing to say. I didn't really find anything I wanted to say. And all of a sudden my phone rings, and I pick it up, and I hear on the other line, this is Ahuva Albrecht. I have your number, and I have no idea why I have your number. I'm supposed to call you, but I don't know who you are. And so I said, oh, remember me? I'm the one who called you right before Pesach and asked you if your story is true. And she said, oh. And I said, can you answer these questions now? And she said, yes. So I said, Ahuva, it said in the original letter that you got from the Rebbe, the Rebbe said, in the letter of advice that you opened to, the Rebbe told the woman, get a beautiful sheitel and don't worry about the cost because I'm going to pay for it. I said, Ahuva, did the Rebbe pay for your wig? Now you have to understand, she wrote this letter years after the Rebbe's funeral, right? I said, did the Rebbe pay for your wig? And she said, and how? You want to hear about it? I said, yeah, I want to hear about it. So she said that, okay, so she said that after her husband got well, she bought any old wig right away. When the Rebbe said to buy a wig, she went out, she got any old wig in Baltimore. But after her husband got better, I think, they went to Israel. And while they were in Israel, in Bnei Brak, wigs are cheaper in Israel than they are in America. Or at least they were back then, in around year 2000. So she went to Bnei Brak. She went to a wig store, and she got a very, very nice wig. Just like the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said to buy a beautiful wig. She bought a beautiful wig. And she said, but Shlomo Yehudis, there was a problem with the wig. I said, what was the problem with the wig? She said, it was too beautiful. It was too gorgeous. And I said, what do you mean too gorgeous? She said, I'm in my 40s and I look like I was in my 20s. She said, it was a va-va-voom wig. I looked really good. And she said, and she brought it home, and she wasn't sure about it. And there was a big wedding, and she went and she wore it to the big wedding. And she felt, like, I guess it was very long and, curly or whatever. I don't know what it was. And she felt a little odd and a little self-conscious, but she said, it's okay. Just, it's the first time you're wearing something. And she sat down at one point in the wedding, and then she didn't realize it, but a man pulled up a friend of the family pulled up his chair behind her, behind her back, leaned forward and said, how you doing, gorgeous? And she said, oh my gosh. She said, I'm never wearing this wig outside again, never. I'm never wearing it outside again. That's it. I don't know if I'll ever wear it again. I'm not wearing it outside, that's for sure. And she was thinking, when I come home from this wedding, when the wedding's over, that's it. It's not the right wig for me. It's not proper. And so anyway, but before she left the wedding, when she was still at the wedding, the guy left, and another lady came and sat down next to her. And this lady happened to be one of the richest women in the observant Baltimore community. It was quite a wealthy lady. And she sat down and she said, Ahuva, do you want to do a mitzvah? And I think this is the most remarkable part of the story. Ahuva said, sure. Now, if somebody asks me, Shlomo Yehudis, want to do a mitzvah? I don't know, what would you answer to such a situation? Most people would say, yeah, well, depends. What's the mitzvah? She didn't say that. She said, sure, a mitzvah? Sure, yes, I'd like to do a mitzvah. So the lady told her, that wig that you're wearing, I want to tell you something about it. She said, I have a friend, she's not Jewish, I have a very close friend, not Jewish. She lives in, I think it was Texas, I can't remember already. And her daughter is 30 years old, and she has alopecia, which means you lose all your body hair. And she said she is in a terribly deep depression. She's in an absolutely deep depression because she's horrified about what happened to her. She said, the rich lady said, that wig that you're wearing looks an awful lot like her hair before she lost it. What I want to do is, I wonder, would you allow me to overnight your wig to Texas so that and we'll overnight it back the next day, but just so she could see that there are possibilities in this world. She doesn't have to look, she can look nice again. And because I have to say the frum world is at least it's been, for the most part, ahead of the rest of the world in wigs, because we all wear them. And so anyway, she wanted this girl to see that there are beautiful wigs out there. And so Ahuva said, fine, you can overnight it. It's my pleasure. So the rich lady overnights, she picks it up, I guess, from her, overnights it to Texas. And she gets a phone call the next day. And she said, Ahuva, I have good news and I have bad news. She said, the good news is she's ecstatic. She is so in love with your wig. She is so happy. And the bad news is she said she's never returning it. She won't mail it back. She can't give it up. And Ahuva laughed and she said, it's fine. She can keep it. It is fine. I'm fine with that. She can keep it. Just tell her it's fine. It's my gift to her. So she and Ahuva and her husband go away for like a 3-day vacation. And then they come back, and she finds that somebody stuffed an envelope through her mail slot into her house. She opens the envelope, and there's $3,000 in there. I don't know if it's from the rich lady or from the rich lady's friend. I'm not sure, but it's from one of them. And it's in gratitude to Ahuva for giving away her wig. And she said, Shalom Yehudis, you know what that $3,000 paid for? She said, I forgot to tell you that when I was in B'nai Brak getting that beautiful wig, I also got another beautiful wig. It's very beautiful too, but it's more modest. And she said, and when I stopped wearing the other wig, I started wearing the beautiful but modest one. And I love it. And she said, the $3,000 covered not only the Vavavoom wig, but it covered the wig that I'm now wearing, and it covered the plane flight to Israel and back. So she said, if the Rebbe says he's going to pay for something, you better believe he's going to pay for it. So anyway, okay. So why would some, let's say you're not in a pickle, yeah? Why would somebody write to the Rebbe? And I think the reason is to reestablish there is a soul connection already. There is a soul connection already. Even, there's a soul connection between every Jew and Rosh B'nai Israel. Okay, so, if I think everybody here, but because there is one new person today, and maybe there's going to be somebody who listens to it. The Rebbe is not just a miracle worker. The Rebbe told us very important things. He told us incredibly important prophecies that have all come true. And in addition to the global ones that I already talked about in past sessions, he gave prophecies to individuals. There was a I can't remember his name right now, but there was a state senator in New York, a Jewish guy, and he and his wife came to the Rebbe. They didn't say a word about, she really wanted another kid. She hadn't had a kid for a very long time. She was 49 years old. But she was afraid to say anything because she's 49 years old, so she didn't even ask for a blessing. But this was the deepest desire in her heart. And the Rebbe gave them $1, which is what the Rebbe would do for people. He'd give them $1 and a blessing, and the Rebbe said, you're going to have an addition in your family this year. They had the addition in their family that year. And as I told you before, a friend of mine, her mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she went to 5 specialists. She had 11 x-rays, and all the doctors said, it's a terrible thing inside you. It's huge. And it's almost certainly something terrible. And my friend got a blessing from the Rebbe. This was after the Rebbe couldn't speak anymore. The Rebbe just, when they asked for a blessing, the Rebbe just nodded. And the woman had a biopsy. There was, days after the Rebbe gave his blessing, the doctors opened her up. There was nothing in there, absolutely nothing in there. And everybody, whatever. So, and even about famous people like Ariel Sharon, Arik Sharon, when he was a general, or maybe he was ready in office in Israel, he came to see the Rebbe, and just, politicians came to see the Rebbe a lot. And so he saw the Rebbe, And at the end of the time he was seeing the Rebbe said, when are you going home to Israel? And he said, tomorrow, my flight's tomorrow. And the Rebbe said, surely you won't go home tomorrow. Surely you'll stay at least another day. And he left the Rebbe's office. And when people would leave the Rebbe's office, if they were a famous personality or somebody like that, people would leap on and say, what did the Rebbe say? What did the Rebbe say? And he said, oh, he just said some pleasant, we had a good discussion, and he ended with a nice little pleasantry saying, I shouldn't go home tomorrow. I should delay my trip. And they said, so are you going to do it? He said, of course not. I'm a major politician. I have to get back in time. And they said, you don't understand. If the Rebbe said something, he doesn't say pleasantries. If he said to delay your trip, you need to delay your trip. So he delayed his trip for a day. The flight that he was supposed to take was hijacked, and they were looking for a highly placed official. They were a highly placed Israeli politician, in other words, him. So, but they didn't find him. So you could look that up online yourself, Ariel Sharon. So anyway, so for our own, for our own well-being, it's good to establish a connection with someone who we already have a connection with, but we're not aware of it. So how do we do it? You wash your hands right, left, right, left, right, left, alternately. You give charity before you write, and ideally, it's a great thing to learn something that the Rebbe wrote. Learn something that the Rebbe said. My letters to the Rebbe, my answers from the Rebbe got so much more on target after I started learning the Rebbe's writings. They were always okay, but they became like bullseye, bullseye, bullseye after I started learning the Rebbe's writings. So there are many, I just wanted to pull out a few books that I like. This is a book by a very good writer, Eliyahu Tauger. And it's called As a New Day Breaks. And it explains about, the Rebbe said, as we said before, the Rebbe said in 1991 that the redemption has actually arrived and it's beginning to unfold. Just because things look kooky does not mean the redemption's not beginning to unfold. In Egypt, as we remember, Moses told the people, God sent me, we're getting out of here. And what happened? Things got much worse. They started putting babies, the Egyptians started plastering Jewish babies into the wall, into cement walls. Redemption it's not an instant process, but it's a good process, and it's going to end well. This is one of my favorite books. You can't get it anymore, so I probably shouldn't even show it to you, but anything by this guy, Arnie Gottfried, is really wonderful. This book is called Living in the Age of Mashiach. I'm trying to get him to make a reprint. This is an old book. It's a magnificent book, though. It's called Timeless Patterns in Time, and it's about the Jewish holidays. And I had been observant for a long time before I became a Lubavitcher, and so I already knew quite a bit. And it's very short essays, very easy to read. And I remember one Yom Kippur, I read one of the essays on Yom Kippur, and I said, "Oh, so that's what Yom Kippur is all about." I'd already been keeping it for many, many years, learning about it for many, many years, but the Rebbe explains everything so beautifully and so simply. So, or you can still get volume 2, my favorite book of miracles. It's called Miracles and Amazing Stories in Our Times by Yehudis Engel. Magnificent stories, and I know her. I've met her on a few occasions, and she's a magnificent storyteller. And she didn't put anything in here that she didn't document. So what are the activities that we can do? 8:05, I'm getting off in 2 minutes. What are the activities that we can do in this time? Because this time calls for action. We can not only write to the Rebbe, we can learn. That's an activity, to learn about what's happening. Learn about the redemption. That's an activity. We can do. It's a huge thing. The Rebbe, our time is called the time of action. There was a generation that were primarily, scholars, and our generation we're primarily associated with action. So we can light Shabbos candles, and it's so easy in the summertime to light Shabbos candles. And when I say light Shabbos candles, I mean obviously the way Hashem wants it done, which is before sunset, never after sunset. After sunset, it's the opposite of a mitzvah. And we light ideally 18 minutes or a little bit earlier, even earlier than that. There happens to be an early end on the lighting candle. So, you can't light before a certain time. It has to be, for example, this coming Shabbos, you don't light before 6:49. Actual candle lighting is 8:06, but you can light early as 6:49, but not before then. And what we're doing is not a romantic thing; it's a holy thing. And when a holy thing is done properly, you've brought light into the world. You've combated darkness, not just with the light of the candle, but you've lighted a spiritual candle. You've lit up the darkness. We can teach. It's so simple. You just tell people, guess what? Lubavitcher Rebbe said in 1992 that the redemption is already unfolding. And all the things that we see, we may not understand them, but they're part of the redemption. And finally, we can see good. It's a very big part of life. A very big part of life is to see good and see the good that's happening. Because whenever good comes into the world, Hashem makes darkness come in at the same time to mask it. So because he wants people to have free choice, and we have to use our free choice to look for the good, to push away the darkness and look for the good that's actually happening. In this week's Parsha, it's Parsha's Shlach, and it's all about spies who were sent. The Jewish people asked to send spies into Israel before they went in. They came back with a terrible report about Israel. Terrible report. Let's not go. It's awful. There's giants there. They're going to eat us up. And the people are huge, and they're all capable, and we're like grasshoppers compared to them. And they totally missed what Israel really was. They totally missed the gorgeous gift that Israel was. So too with our time now. Our time now, people can completely miss that it is a gift. It is a special, spiritually potent time. We can look at it and say, oh, it's the worst time I ever lived through in my life. Horrible, horror after horror. Or you can push aside, yeah, there is blackness, but you can push it aside and say, this is a gift. We already are in the time of the redemption. I'm going to look for the good. I'm going to look for what's going on. Okay, that's it. Anybody have any questions? Yes, Amy.
I just wanted to say, I have never written to the Rebbe, and I asked a question about it just before you started to speak, and I wrote to you instead, and you answered my question like 17 times. It was a little mini miracle that I had a very specific question that I put out there, and it's almost, it was really interesting that you spoke straight to it. So
Are you serious? That's so funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
And also, like, when folks are done with the questioning, I wanted to share something with you, but it's not
Awesome.
relevant to the talk. But I was
Okay.
going to share it. I'll share my screen when, for those who want to see when the class is over.
Okay, wonderful.
But thank you, because you answered my question. I had a really important
So
question.
interesting.
And then I also got a couple of holy books, and I asked it there too, and I got a very nice answer. So
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything to say?
Shulamis, if we don't have the Rebbe's writings and
Yeah.
we do it in just in a holy book, do we do it the same way? I mean, does it work the same
You
way?
can put it, yes, you can put it into any holy book. I think I've told a story before about how, the head of Lakewood, Aaron Cutler, I told the story before, how he couldn't decide after the Holocaust if he should go to America or Israel. And he opened up the Chumash, he opened up the 5 books of Moses. And his name was Aaron Cutler, and he opened up to a passage that was in which God was speaking to Aaron, the same name, and said, go to the desert and join your brother Moshe in the desert. He knew instantly what that meant, because they called America at that time the spiritual desert. He knew immediately he had to go to America and join Moses, his brother, the major Torah scholar in that segment of the Orthodox world was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. And so he knew, I have to go join Moshe Feinstein in New York, in America. He went to America, founded the largest yeshiva in the world, and the rest is history. So yeah, you can use another book. And if you want, anytime you can book an appointment with me and come to my house, and we can open up a book of the Rebbe's letters. And sometimes it's good to have somebody else reading with you. because you're so anxious to get your answer that sometimes you miss it. It's right there in your face, and sometimes you can miss it. So sometimes it's good to have somebody else read with you.
I have to say goodbye to everyone. Have a
Okay.
wonderful, safe week,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
Emily.
Thank you.
Have a good
So much.
night.
Sorry about. Okay. Sorry, I don't know what happened to the email. Okay.
Can
Yeah.
I share something with you guys?
Yes, please.
Am I allowed to share screen?
Yes. So I how can I share screen with you?
I'm going to do it. I'm going to
Okay,
show you
good.
something.
Okay.
All right.
Can I just ask it's not even a real question?
Yeah.
It's just a clarification of what is a collective soul? I don't get that.
A
Oh,
collective soul is somebody who has a collective soul is a soul that has connections to other souls. It's
Like a rabbi.
yeah, it's called a general soul or a collective soul, and they have connections to other Jews, so that yeah, and yeah,
Okay,
good question.
thank you.
Okay,
It was short. I'm sorry, Amy.
okay, good.
no worries. No, it says that the host disabled that function. So I
So
can't,
how do I enable it?
I don't know. I wanted to share.
I'm going to enable you to share screen. Here it
Okay,
is.
Great.
Okay, good.
All
Can you
right,
see
here we go.
Okay.
You guys see?
Oh,
Huge.
yes.
Oh, how
Guys
cute.
seeing this? This is coming home to us on Friday.
Oh,
Oh,
adorable.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so
Very
yeah,
sweet.
I mentioned to Shalom Jehudis after class a number of weeks ago that about our older dog. So this is our new puppy that's coming this Friday. I just want-
Oh, he's
so
precious.
cute.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Beautiful.
He has an
Beautiful.
older brother?
she has an older sister, so yeah. Let me see.
What kind of a dog is she?
He's a Labradoodle. Isn't she
A
cute?
Labradoodle.
Adorable.
Stop sharing
Very
for a moment.
sweet.
Absolutely adorable.
The backside. You may have seen her earlier. This is the backside of the
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Oh.
yeah who
Very
was hanging
cute.
out with us earlier. So
Okay. You know, I have a
Yitto, what's the problem?
Very
Yitto, what's the problem?